The forest does not forget. It remembers every footstep pressed into its soil, every scream swallowed by its trees, every promise made under moonlight. Some trails are not meant to be walked, because once you step onto them, they begin walking you. This is the story of survival, of guilt that refuses to fade, and of a path that remembers blood. This is the Moonlit Trail. Chapter 1. The Moonlit Trail. The scream came apart in the trees before it ever reached her. It wasn't loud, not the kind that split the night open, but it snagged on the bark and needles, unraveling into something thin and unfinished. It slid along the ground like cold breath, curling around Rowan Hale's ankles as she froze mid-step. The forest held still. Rowan's boot hovered above the dirt, the sole dusted with pale ash from the trail. The moonlight bled through the branches in broken coins, silvering the moss and the twisted roots that surfaced like knuckles. Somewhere nearby, a stream whispered over stone, steady and indifferent. The smell of damp earth pressed up around her, rich and metallic, layered with pine sap and something older, rot, maybe, or wet fur. She lowered her foot slowly. Gravel clicked once, too loud. Rowan winced and waited for the night to react. Nothing answered. No owl winged away. No deer bolted. The silence had weight, the kind that pressed against the eardrums until they rang. Her breath sounded wrong in it, too fast, too close. She slid her hand to the hilt at her hip, fingers brushing worn leather. The grip was slick with sweat despite the cold. "Don't," she whispered, though she wasn't sure whether she was talking to herself or the thing that had screamed. The trail curved ahead, a pale ribbon cut through the dark. Moonlight clung to it stubbornly, refusing to touch the undergrowth on either side. The trees leaned inward, their branches knitting overhead until the sky became a narrow seam of stars. Rowan had walked this path 100 times in daylight. At night, it felt like trespassing. Her cloak rasped softly as she shifted her weight. The fabric smelled faintly of smoke and iron, reminders of campfires and sharpened blades. When she took another step, the ground dipped, and her ankle rolled slightly over a hidden root. Pain flared sharp and bright. She sucked in air through her teeth, the taste of copper blooming on her tongue. "Idiot," she muttered. The words steadied her, familiar, solid. She listened again. The scream didn't come back. Instead, there was a sound like breath being drawn through wet cloth. Slow, deliberate, it carried from somewhere ahead on the trail, just beyond the bend where the moonlight thinned. Rowan's shoulders tightened. She could turn back. The thought rose unbidden, vivid as a hand on her spine. The camp was less than an hour behind her. Warm fires, the low murmur of voices, stew thick with salt and onions. Safety, if such a thing existed anymore. But the sound came again, closer this time. A hitch in it, as if whoever, or whatever, was breathing had forgotten how. Rowan stepped forward. Her boots sank into mud, cold seeping through the leather. The trail narrowed, the trees pressing closer until bark brushed her sleeves. She could feel the forest watching, not with eyes but with memory. Every snapped twig, every scuffed stone was being counted. Her father's voice surfaced without warning. "Never follow a sound you don't understand." He used to say it while cleaning his traps, fingers deft, expression calm. He had smelled like tobacco and steel then. Rowan swallowed. Her throat felt tight, dry as old paper. "I hear you," she called, pitching her voice low. steady. If you're hurt, say so. The words fell flat, absorbed by the dark. She rounded the bend. The trail opened into a small clearing where the moonlight pooled bright and cold. In the center lay a figure twisted on the ground, half in shadow, half bathed in silver. A man, or what remained of one. His coat was torn open, the fabric dark and stiff around his chest. One arm reached out, fingers clawing at nothing. His mouth worked soundlessly, lips gray. Rowan's stomach clenched. The air smelled wrong here. Too sharp. Blood carried a copper tang that coated the back of her throat. She could hear it now, the wet, broken breathing, rattling in his chest like stones in a jar. She crouched beside him, careful to keep her weight balanced, eyes scanning the tree line even as her hands moved. Training took over, pushing the panic down into something smaller, manageable. "Easy," she murmured. "Don't try to speak." His eyes flicked toward her. They were wide, glassy, reflecting the moon. Fear lived there, raw and unhidden. His fingers twitched, brushing her sleeve. The touch was shockingly warm. Rowan pressed her palm to his chest and felt the uneven flutter beneath her hand. Her skin came away slick. She grimaced, reaching for her satchel. "What happened?" she asked, though she already knew better. The man's jaw trembled. A sound scraped out of him, half word, half sob. "Trail," he rasped. It came from the trail. A chill slid down Rowan's spine. She glanced back at the path behind her. From here, it looked harmless. Just dirt and moonlight. "Stay with me," she said, her voice firmer now. "I can slow the bleeding." She tore a strip from her cloak, the fabric ripping with a soft snarl. As she pressed it to his wound, her fingers brushed something hard beneath the torn coat. Not bone, something smooth, carved. Her breath hitched. The man's grip tightened on her sleeve, nails biting through the fabric. His eyes rolled, whites flashing. "Don't," he whispered. The word came out wet, thick with dread. "Don't walk it." The forest exhaled. Branches creaked overhead, a long, stretching sound. Somewhere deeper in the trees, something shifted, heavy, unhurried. Rowan stilled, every muscle drawn taut. She could hear her own heartbeat now, loud as a drum, thudding in her ears. She leaned closer to the man, lowering her voice until it was barely more than breath. "What walks it?" His gaze slid past her shoulder, fixing on the trail. His mouth opened. The scream finally broke free, tearing out of him and echoing through the clearing. Birds burst from the canopy in a flurry of wings. The sound clawed at Rowan's nerves, setting her teeth on edge. Then it cut off. His body went slack beneath her hands. The warmth bled away, leaving a hollow chill. Rowan stared down at him, her fingers still pressed to his chest, feeling nothing. The night rushed back in, louder than before. The stream whispered. Leaves rustled. The trail waited. Rowan stood slowly, the torn strip of cloak hanging useless from her hand. Blood smeared her fingers, tacky and cooling in the air. She wiped them on her trousers without looking. From the corner of her eye, the moonlight on the trail shifted. Not much, just enough. Rowan's hand slid back to her blade. She squared her shoulders, planting her feet in the dirt. Whatever had walked this path had been careless enough to leave a witness. It wouldn't leave another. Chapter 2. The Weight of Silence. Rowan did not run. The thought flickered. Hot, instinctive, but she crushed it beneath the steady placement of her boots. Running made noise. Running turned the forest into a mouth that swallowed the careless whole. Instead, she stood with her blade half drawn, breathing through her nose, counting the sounds she could still hear. Water over stone, leaves ticking against one another, the faint hiss of her own breath between her teeth. Nothing else. The man's body lay where it had fallen, eyes open, reflecting the moon like dull glass. Rowan crouched long enough to close them. His skin had already cooled, the warmth retreating as if embarrassed to linger. When she straightened, her knees protested, a soft ache blooming where old injuries lived. She ignored it. The trail ahead glimmered. It shouldn't have moved. Moonlight didn't slide like that. It didn't thicken in places, thin in others, as if something unseen disturbed its surface. Rowan's mouth tasted of iron again, though she hadn't bitten her tongue this time. "Enough," she whispered, not in fear, but in warning. She knelt beside the body once more and reached beneath the torn coat, fingers cautious. The hard shape she'd felt earlier pressed against her knuckles. She drew it out slowly. A token. It was carved from bone or pale wood, smooth with handling, etched in looping symbols that tugged uncomfortably at the eye. The lines refused to sit still. When Rowan tried to follow one, it seemed to bend away at the last moment. She turned it over. The surface was warm. Not sun-warm, body-warm. Her grip tightened until the edges bit into her palm. "This isn't yours," she murmured to the dead man, though she suspected he'd never known what it truly was. The forest creaked again, closer this time. The sound came from the left, deep among the trees, like weight shifting on old joints. Rowan rose in one smooth motion and stepped backward, placing herself between the body and the trail. Her boots sank slightly into the damp earth. She adjusted her stance, testing balance, feeling for roots beneath the soil. A smell drifted on the air. Not rot, not blood, smoke. Faint, distant, threaded with something bitter. It stirred a memory unbidden. A night long ago, a village edge glowing orange, her mother's hand tight around her wrist. Rowan shook it off, jaw tightening. "Show yourself," she said. Her voice carried farther than she expected, skimming the clearing and slipping between the trees. It felt thin once it left her mouth, like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. The smoke scent faded. Silence rushed back in to fill the space. Rowan exhaled slowly and glanced at the token again. The symbols seemed deeper now, shadows pulling in their grooves. She wrapped it in the strip of torn cloak and tucked it into her satchel, the weight settling against her hip like an accusation. She couldn't leave the body here. She wouldn't. With careful movements, she dragged the man toward the edge of the clearing, muscles burning as his weight pulled against the mud. The ground sucked greedily at her boots, making each step a negotiation. She positioned him beneath a thick pine, the branches low and heavy with needles. The resin scent clung to her hands as she broke smaller limbs and laid them over him, not hiding, never that, but sheltering. "I'm sorry," she said, the words rough. "I'll come back." The promise tasted hollow. When she turned back toward the trail, it looked narrower than before. The moonlight clung to it stubbornly, refusing to spill into the forest proper. Rowan hesitated at its edge, heart thudding slow and heavy in her chest. "Never follow a sound you don't understand." Her father's voice again, this time sharper, insistent. Rowan stepped onto the path. The dirt felt different beneath her boots, firmer, almost warm, as if the ground remembered footsteps. Her cloak brushed her calves, whispering with each movement. She kept her eyes forward, blade loose in her grip, senses stretched thin. The forest leaned in. With every step, the sounds changed. The stream's whisper fell away, replaced by a low hum she felt more than heard. It vibrated through her bones, a distant resonance that set her teeth on edge. The air thickened, pressing against her lungs, carrying the faint taste of ash. She passed markings carved into the trees, old ones, half swallowed by bark. Symbols echoed the shapes on the token, though these were rougher, angrier, cut deep and left to scar. Rowan brushed one with her fingers. The wood felt slick, as if it had been oiled recently. Her skin crawled. "How many?" she asked the dark voice barely above the hum. No answer came, but the hum deepened, responding in its own way. The trail dipped sharply, leading her into a hollow where the moonlight thinned to a pale smear overhead. Shadows pooled thick and black between the roots. Rowan slowed, placing each foot with care. Her breath fogged faintly in front of her, though the night wasn't cold enough for it. Then she heard footsteps, not behind her, ahead, measured, unhurried, each step placed with deliberate precision, matching her pace as if in mockery. The sound was wrong, too heavy for a single person, too light for something larger. Rowan stopped. The footsteps stopped. Her fingers tightened on the hilt of her blade. "You're not subtle," she said. "If you wanted me dead, you'd have tried already." A pause. Then, a laugh. It slid through the hollow like oil over water, low and amused, scraping softly at the edges. Rowan felt it along her spine, raising gooseflesh along her arms. Still sharp, a voice said, layered and uneven, as if more than one throat shaped the words. "Your father taught you well." Rowan's breath caught despite herself. The name sat heavy on her tongue, unspoken. Her shoulders squared, muscles coiling tight. "You shouldn't use him," she said. "It won't help you." Another step forward. The figure remained just beyond the reach of the moonlight, a shape suggested rather than seen. Rowan could make out the suggestion of limbs, the glint of something pale where eyes might be. "I don't need help," the voice replied. "I need you to listen." Rowan shifted her weight, the dirt whispering beneath her boot. "You've already killed one man tonight." A sound like a sigh drifted back. "He chose the trail. So did I." "Yes," the voice agreed softly. "You did." The hum beneath her feet deepened, pulsing once. Rowan felt it in her chest, rattling her ribs. The token in her satchel grew warm, heat seeping through the fabric. The figure leaned closer to the light, not enough to reveal itself, but enough that Rowan caught the scent of smoke again, stronger now, threaded with something sweet and sickly. "You're standing on old ground," the voice said. "It remembers blood. It remembers promises." Rowan lifted her blade fully, the metal catching what little light there was. "Then remember this," she said. "I don't break mine." Silence stretched between them, taut as a drawn wire. Somewhere deep in the forest, something answered, a long, distant sound that might once have been a howl. Rowan did not step back. Chapter 3. Ash and Quiet. Dawn never quite arrived. It lingered at the edges of the forest, a pale dilution of night rather than its end. The moon faded to a thin scar overhead, and the sky lightened just enough to make the shadows softer, less defined. Rowan walked beneath it all with her hood down, letting the cool air brush her sweat-damp hair. Each breath tasted faintly of ash and wet leaves. The trail widened here, losing some of its unnatural precision. Moss crept back over the edges, reclaiming inches at a time. Birds had begun to stir, small sounds, cautious ones. A wing fluttered, something skittered through undergrowth, life testing whether it was safe to resume. Rowan's boots were heavy with mud. Every step pulled at her calves, a dull ache spreading upward. She welcomed it. Pain was simple, honest. Ahead, a figure waited beside a fallen log, cloak draped over one shoulder, copper kettle steaming faintly over a low flame. The smell of boiled roots and pine needles cut through the forest's dampness, grounding her in something almost ordinary. "You look like hell," Mara said without turning around. Her voice was dry, edged with humor that never quite softened into warmth. She stirred the kettle with a stick, wrist loose, posture deceptively relaxed. Her hair was pulled back in a rough braid, strands escaping to cling to her temples with sweat. Rowan stopped a few paces away. The silence between them stretched, filled with the hiss of the fire and the distant call of a thrush. "You didn't answer my signal," Mara went on. "Twice. So I figured you were either dead or doing something stupid." She glanced over her shoulder. "Good to see you're consistent." Rowan huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. She leaned against a nearby tree, the bark rough against her shoulder blades. "You followed me," Mara shrugged. "You always take the long way when you don't want company." She poured the steaming liquid into 2 tin cups and held one out. Rowan took it, the metal warming her palms. The smell was sharp and earthy. She sipped and grimaced. "Still terrible," she said. "Still drinkable," Mara replied. "Sit." Rowan lowered herself onto the fallen log. The wood was damp, cool seeping through her trousers. She stretched her legs out, rolling her ankles slowly, listening to the joints pop. The forest around them breathed, a low collective sigh as mist thinned between the trees. They drank in silence for a while. Mara watched the fire, eyes narrowed slightly, as if reading something in the way the flames bent. Rowan traced a line in the dirt with the toe of her boot, the soil soft and dark. The token in her satchel pressed warm against her hip, a steady reminder. "You went onto the trail," Mara said finally. It wasn't a question. Rowan didn't look up. "I didn't plan to." "You never do." A bird took off nearby, wings beating a brief alarm. Rowan swallowed, the liquid in her throat suddenly thick. "There was a man," she said. "Dying." Mara's jaw tightened. She set her cup down carefully. "Was." Rowan nodded. The memory surfaced unbidden, the glassy eyes, the scream tearing loose. Her fingers curled in the dirt until it packed beneath her nails. He said it came from the trail, Rowan went on. And he was right. The fire popped, a spark jumping and dying in the ash. Mara leaned back on her hands, gaze lifting to the pale sky. You always did have a talent for finding the worst paths. Rowan closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, the forest looked washed thin, colors muted. It knew his name, she said. It knew my father. That got Mara's attention. She turned fully now, studying Rowan's face, the set of her mouth. Say that again, she said quietly. Rowan shifted, the log creaking beneath her weight. Her throat tightened, words bunching up like thorns. She took a breath, slow and deliberate, filling her lungs with damp air and smoke. It spoke like it remembered him, she said. Like he was part of it. Mara stared at her for a long moment. The humor drained from her expression, leaving something sharper underneath. And you didn't tell me this before because? She prompted. Rowan's fingers dug deeper into the dirt. She could feel the grit between them, the sting where skin broke. Because I wasn't sure, she said. And because once I say it out loud, it becomes real. Mara exhaled slowly through her nose. Rowan, I lied to you, Rowan said. The words landed heavy between them. Mara didn't interrupt. Rowan swallowed again, tasting earth. The night my father disappeared, I followed him. The forest seemed to lean closer, the fires hiss loud in the quiet. I told you I woke to an empty camp, Rowan continued. That I found the trail alone. That's not what happened. Her hands shook now. She clenched them into fists, nails biting into skin. The pain anchored her. He heard something in the woods, she said. A voice. I followed at a distance. Thought I was being careful. Mara's gaze didn't waver. I saw him step onto the Moonlit Trail, Rowan whispered. I saw it change beneath his feet. And I didn't call out. I didn't run after him. The memory surged, silver light bending, the forest holding its breath. Rowan's chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. I turned back, she said. I told myself I'd imagined it. By morning, he was gone. Silence pressed in, thick as fog. Mara reached for her cup, found it empty, and set it down again. Her voice, when it came, was low. You were a child. I was old enough to choose, Rowan said. And I chose wrong. The fire crackled softly. Ash drifted upward, catching the light before dissolving into the air. The smell of smoke clung to Rowan's clothes, to her hair, to the memory itself. Mara stood and paced a few steps, boots scuffing leaves. She stopped with her back to Rowan, shoulders rising and falling once. You should have told me, she said. I know. Mara turned. Her eyes were bright, not wet, but sharp with feeling. You don't get to carry this alone. Rowan let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It shuddered on the way out. The trail is awake, Rowan said. And it remembers me now. Mara picked up her pack and slung it over her shoulder, movements brisk but controlled. Then we don't give it time to think, she said. We move. We watch each other's backs. She offered a hand. Rowan stared at it for a moment, then took it. Mara's grip was firm, solid. The contact sent a small, unexpected warmth through her chest. They doused the fire, scattering ash until only a dark smear remained. As they set off together, the forest shifted around them. Branches parting, light filtering through in narrow bands. The trail ahead was quieter now. Not silent, waiting. Chapter 4. Shadows between trees. The forest seemed to breathe around them. Every footstep Rowan took pressed into soft earth, leaving a faint imprint that vanished almost immediately beneath fallen leaves and moss. Dampness clung to her cloak, and the air smelled of loam and decaying pine needles, sharp and sweet at the same time. Somewhere above, a thin wind rattled dry branches, carrying with it a whisper of frost despite the day's slow warmth. Rowan kept her blade loose in her hand, though not out. It was a rhythm she had learned, the readiness to strike paired with the patience to wait. Mara walked beside her, pack shifting lightly on her shoulders, hands brushing over the straps absent-mindedly, as if the movement anchored her thoughts. For miles, the trail curled and dipped, teasing them with glimpses of moonlight that lingered stubbornly on roots and stones. Sometimes Rowan would catch the flicker of a reflective eye in the underbrush, and she'd pause, blade half raised, heart skipping a beat. But each time, the shadows were empty, creatures long gone or hiding, watching, patient. The silence was not peaceful. Rowan's fingers itched, curling and uncurling as if she could grasp the night itself. "Do you ever think it's watching us right now?" she asked, voice low. The word seemed swallowed immediately by the trees. Mara didn't answer for a while. When she did, it was deliberate. "It's always watching, but not always noticing. That's the difference between us and it." The trail narrowed sharply as they entered a gorge. The walls of rock pressed close, jagged and slick with moss. Water ran in thin rivulets along the stone, a cold hiss under the forest's heavy quiet. Rowan lowered herself to a crouch to navigate a particularly steep patch, fingertips brushing cold, wet rock. The roughness bit through her gloves, biting small red crescents into her skin. Mara followed, sliding one hand along the rock for support. She breathed slow, careful breaths, the faint scent of pine resin and wet stone clinging to her. "Rowan," she said finally, voice quieter now, almost intimate in the canyon's hush. "Why didn't you ever tell me what you saw the night your father vanished?" Rowan's fingers lingered on a root, damp and rough under her palm. She could feel the sap seep slightly into her skin, a sticky reminder of life persisting even here, even in the shadows. Her jaw tightened. "I thought you wouldn't understand," she said finally. The words tasted like ash and copper in her mouth. "Not at first. Not then." Mara stopped mid-step, turning slowly to face her. The light catching her eyes made them pale green, almost gray in the dimness. "Try me," she said. Rowan exhaled, a shaky sound that fogged the air. She crouched again, lowering her gaze to the damp trail. "I saw him step onto the Moonlit Trail," she whispered. "And it moved beneath his feet. Not the dirt or stone. It was like the trail itself, bent, alive." Her hand clenched into a fist, digging into the mud. He was swallowed by it, Mara. And I couldn't, save him." Mara's lips pressed together. Her gaze softened, but there was no pity, only focus. "You were a child," she said, almost too quietly. "You made the choice to survive. That doesn't make you guilty." Rowan shook her head. "It's not about guilt," she said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's about memory. The trail remembers. And now it remembers me." A shiver ran down her spine as a breeze slithered through the gorge, carrying the faint metallic tang of blood and ash. Water dripped from overhead, splashing into shallow pools. Each drop echoed faintly, a tiny punctuation in the canyon's heavy silence. Rowan's teeth chattered despite herself. Mara crouched beside her, fingers brushing a strand of hair from Rowan's face. The contact was simple, grounding, and Rowan felt herself steady slightly. "Then we keep moving," Mara said. Her voice was calm, resolute, steady as the river running alongside them. "We don't give it the chance to decide what it remembers next." Rowan nodded. The weight of the token in her satchel pressed against her hip, hot and insistent, as if it knew the forest could feel it too. She adjusted her pack, pulling it tighter to her back, and rose to her feet. The canyon seemed to narrow, almost to hold them in place, but the forest beyond beckoned, sprawling and indifferent. They moved together, side by side, boots sinking occasionally into mud, hands brushing stones and roots to steady themselves. Every sound, birdsong, dripping water, the whisper of leaves, seemed amplified, layered with the hum beneath their feet, a vibration Rowan couldn't identify but couldn't ignore. "Do you ever wonder," Rowan asked after a while, voice low, almost swallowed by the gorge, "if he's still there?" "My father?" Mara's pace slowed, the gravel beneath her boots scraping faintly. She tilted her head toward the gorge wall, shadow and light dancing across her features. "Not him," she said. "But something that wants to be him. Or wants you to think it is. That's why it knows your name." Rowan swallowed hard. The forest seemed to lean closer, branches whispering overhead. She could taste copper again in her mouth. Every instinct screamed caution, but she pressed forward. "And the token?" Rowan asked, feeling its weight as if it pulsed in tandem with her heartbeat. Mara glanced at her briefly, eyes narrowing. It's not just a marker, she said. It's a signal, a warning, and maybe a tether. The trail rose then, leading them out of the canyon and into a shallow ridge where the trees thinned. Mist clung to the earth, damp and fragrant, curling around roots and rocks like smoke. Rowan inhaled, the scent almost intoxicating, damp moss, pine, ash, and felt the tension in her shoulders ease fractionally. They stopped at the ridge's edge, the forest stretching endlessly below them, a patchwork of shadow and early morning light. Rowan crouched on the slope, boots cold against wet stone, blade resting across her knees. Mara set down her pack, the leather creaking softly. For a long moment, they didn't speak. The forest filled the space between them, humming low, carrying the scent of wet earth, faint smoke, and something indefinable, danger, or maybe memory. Finally, Mara broke the silence. "Whatever happens next," she said, voice careful, "we face it together. No more secrets, Rowan." Rowan nodded, staring at the undulating dark of the forest below. She felt the token against her hip, warm and insistent, like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. "No more secrets," she echoed. Above them, the mist swirled and shifted. A crow cawed somewhere in the distance, and the trail ahead seemed to wait, patient, like it had all the time in the world. Rowan stood slowly, brushing her hands along her thighs, the grit of dirt and stone clinging to her skin. Mara followed. Side by side, they moved down the ridge, into the waiting forest, the soft hum beneath their feet pressing insistently against the quiet. The trail stretched ahead, winding, alive, and Rowan's heartbeat matched its pulse. They were walking into it. And it was waiting. Chapter 5: The Fallen Path. The forest had grown colder. Rowan could feel it in her bones before she noticed it in the air. The mist hung thick now, curling in tendrils around roots and rocks, dampening the sound of their footsteps. Each step left a small print in the soft, spongy moss, but the echo of it seemed muted, swallowed by the low, persistent hum of something in the woods, something patient and watching. Her boots dragged through mud, water seeping into her socks. The scent of wet pine clung to her hair, mixed with the acrid tang of smoke and blood from earlier. She bit her lip until it bled faintly, a sharp taste of iron anchoring her racing thoughts. Mara moved ahead silently, her figure barely visible in the fog. Rowan's eyes kept flicking to the token, warm in her satchel, pressing insistently against her hip. It pulsed almost like a heartbeat, and with each pulse, Rowan felt the weight of the night pressing in tighter. The clearing they stumbled into offered no relief. Instead of the promise of light, they found the remains of a campsite, ashes cold and grey, tents shredded, personal effects scattered and soaked. Something had passed through here. Something fast, brutal. The smell of charred fabric and iron filled the clearing. Rowan gagged, pressing a hand over her mouth, and felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Someone," she began, voice breaking, "they didn't make it." Mara's jaw tightened, hands clenching into fists at her sides. The kettle was overturned, metal warped, spilling half its contents across the wet earth. Steam rose faintly from the puddle, carrying a smell of something spoiled. Mara crouched, brushing ash from a fragment of paper. The words were smeared, unreadable, but their meaning was clear: warning, loss, chaos. Rowan sank to the ground beside a scorched log, heart hammering. Her fingers trailed through the cold ash, picking up fragments of broken wood. The grains bit into her skin. She swallowed, tasting smoke and despair. Her body shook, small and uncontrollable, as if the forest itself had pressed her into submission. This is what it does," she whispered. "It doesn't leave anything." Mara's eyes met hers, green and stormy, reflecting the grey light. "Then we're still alive," she said. Her voice was low, almost brittle, but deliberate. "So we have to keep moving. Even if it killed everyone else, we can't stop." Rowan pressed a palm to her forehead, the cold of her glove seeping into her skin. The forest hummed underfoot, like a beast settling in to watch. She wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to collapse into the moss and forget. But she couldn't. The token burned against her hip, pressing her back into motion. Let's follow it," Rowan murmured, barely audible. "There's something it wants us to see." Mara nodded slowly, brushing ash from her hands. The clearing felt like a wound in the forest, open and raw, and yet somehow, the faintest sliver of light threaded through the mist, illuminating the next stretch of trail. They walked toward it, hearts heavy, spirits tethered to the smallest thread of hope. Chapter 6. Echoes of Loss. The trail twisted, narrowing again, cliffs pressing close on either side. Every step brought a chorus of dripping water, scuttling insects, and the occasional metallic clink of fallen branches underfoot. Rowan's boots were slick, mud pressing through the soles, her legs trembling from exhaustion and cold. The token throbbed faintly in her satchel, warmth pulsing in tandem with the tight ache in her chest. Mara was ahead, her silhouette flickering in the mist. Rowan wanted to call out, but the forest seemed to drink her voice, leaving only echoes that felt mocking. She swallowed, tasting the bitter edge of fear, letting it coat her tongue like a warning. They came upon another clearing. This one smelled worse. Smoke, burnt flesh, and iron, sharp enough to sting the eyes. Rowan's stomach turned. Scattered remains of small animals littered the ground, fur singed, bones gnawed. She gagged and knelt, running a trembling hand over the soil. Wet mud stuck to her fingers, thick and unyielding, grounding her in the reality of what had happened here. Mara knelt beside her, whispering, "It's showing us what we're up against. It's not random." Her voice was steady but tinged with grief. She lifted a scorched branch and let it fall again, the hollow crack echoing through the fog. "We have to understand it, or it'll kill us too." Rowan's chest tightened. I can't keep doing this," she said, voice cracking. "I feel it in my bones, everything I touch, everything I leave behind." She trailed off, watching a crow wheel through the grey mist. Its cry sounded unnervingly human. Mara reached over, gripping Rowan's shoulder. "Then we stop thinking about what's gone. We think about what we can do." Rowan closed her eyes, trying to breathe in the damp, heavy air. She could taste iron and ash on her tongue, smell wet earth, pine, and the faint residue of blood. Her fingers pressed against the token. Heat radiated from it, a whisper of promise in a night full of despair. A distant sound rippled through the fog, a hollow echo, like wind through metal. It was faint, almost dismissible, but it carried a rhythm, a pulse. Rowan's heart thumped in response. She opened her eyes. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Mara nodded, face set. "That's not just wind. Something is moving." Rowan swallowed, fear and hope coiling in her chest. "It's close." Mara's hand brushed against Rowan's. She squeezed, firm and grounding. "Closer than we want, but maybe that means a way forward." Rowan let herself follow Mara's gaze along the trail. A shimmer of light threaded through the mist ahead, faint, flickering. Not moonlight, not quite, but something else. Something deliberate. Chapter 7. A Thread of Light. The trail opened just enough for them to see it. A clearing, narrow and crescent-shaped, bathed in pale, ethereal light. Rowan's boots sank into the damp earth as they stepped forward, and the scent of moss and cold smoke mingled with a faint sweetness, like wildflowers crushed underfoot. Her fingers itched toward the token, pressing it closer to her chest. Mara paused, listening. "It's here," she said. Her voice was soft, but the resolve in it shivered through the forest. "Whatever it wants. It's giving us something." The clearing held a single object, a pedestal of rough stone, partially covered in moss and lichen. On it rested a small bundle wrapped in dark cloth. Rowan's stomach tightened. Fear, dread, hope, they churned together in her chest. She could almost taste them, bitter and electric, as if the forest had infused the air itself. She stepped closer. The token pulsed in response, heat radiating into her palm, grounding her, tethering her to the world. Every instinct screamed caution, but Rowan felt herself drawn forward, desperate for answers. Mara crouched beside her, eyes scanning the edges of the clearing. "It wants us to see this," she said. Her fingers brushed against the moss, feeling the moisture, the texture, the subtle life still clinging there. "We take it carefully, or we lose this chance." Rowan knelt slowly, tracing the bundle with trembling fingers. The cloth was soft, but heavy, weighted with intent. She lifted it gently. Inside, she found a small object, wrapped in another layer, something that glimmered faintly even in the dim light. Rowan's breath hitched. She could hear it, feel it. Hope. Not the bright, blazing kind, but a fragile, desperate glimmer, like embers left from a fire meant to be lost. Her chest ached with relief and fear, and for a moment, she let herself just feel. Mara's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, grounding her. "We've been given a chance," she said. "Maybe the last one." Rowan nodded slowly, clutching the object. It was warm, solid in her hands, a promise made tangible. The mist swirled around them, shadows shifting, the forest silent as if holding its breath. The trail ahead wound deeper, darker, but now, at least, there was a direction, a fragile thread of light in the endless night. Rowan took a steadying breath, tasting wet earth, ash, and hope all at once. She rose to her feet. Mara followed. Together, they stepped forward, into the waiting forest, hearts heavy, but tethered to something that could, just maybe, turn the tide. The forest pulsed around them. The trail waited, and for the first time in days, Rowan dared to believe they might survive it. Chapter 8. Whispers in the Mist. The forest seemed to close around them, tighter now, suffocating in its damp, mossy weight. Every step on the trail pressed their boots into a slick mixture of mud and rotted leaves. Rowan could feel her ankles protest, her muscles trembling, but she pressed forward, every motion deliberate, measured. The token pulsed faintly against her hip, a quiet thrum that matched her heartbeat. Mara walked beside her, eyes scanning the dim, fog-swollen trees. She brushed a hand over her braid, a nervous gesture masked as habit. The air smelled of wet pine and smoke, faintly metallic, like iron left to rust in water, and it clung to Rowan's hair and clothes. She swallowed, tasting it along with the bitter tang of adrenaline. "The trail's changing," Mara said, voice low. "It's shifting, like it's trying to mislead us." She paused. "Look at the roots. They're different, older, younger, mixed in ways that don't make sense." Rowan knelt, fingertips tracing the surface of a twisted root. Its texture was rough, ridged with bark, but the patterns felt deliberate, almost too deliberate. Her fingers itched, tracing the grooves, trying to decipher meaning in the chaos. "It's like it's alive," she whispered. Mara's gaze swept the trees. "It remembers. It's cataloging us, measuring, waiting." The mist thickened, swirling around their legs and ankles, muffling sound. Rowan's own footsteps sounded faint, tentative, swallowed almost entirely by the damp. She could feel the hum beneath her feet again, subtle but insistent, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to her. Panic prickled along her spine. Then she heard it. A whisper. Soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind rustling the leaves. "Rowan." Her blood froze. She turned, scanning the mist, but nothing moved. Just shadows pulling between trees. She felt a cold weight settle over her chest, a hand pressing down she couldn't shake. "Don't stop," Mara said, sensing her pause. "It wants us afraid. We keep moving. Always forward." Rowan nodded, gripping the token in her satchel. Its warmth pressed against her hip, an anchor in the fog of fear. Step by slow step, they moved deeper into the forest. Every sound, the creak of branches, the drip of water, the distant rustle of unseen feet, pressed into their ears. Every smell, wet earth, smoke, decay, suffocated them with memory of loss and danger. And somewhere, always, the whisper followed. Chapter 9: The Weight of Shadows. By midday, the fog had lifted only slightly. Sunlight filtered through in pale, thin shafts that barely warmed the damp forest floor. Rowan's cloak was soaked through, mud clinging to her boots and trousers. Every joint in her body screamed protest, each breath sharp, wet, and heavy with exhaustion. They reached another clearing, one unlike the last. Here, the destruction was more complete. Trees were splintered, as if uprooted by a violent force. Branches hung like broken bones. The air smelled of scorch and iron and something fouler, faintly sweet and rotting. Rowan gagged and pressed a hand to her mouth, tasting ash on her tongue. Mara knelt beside the stump of a tree, running a hand over the jagged bark. "It was here," she said softly. "Something passed through. We're lucky to be alive." Rowan's eyes roamed the clearing. Scattered debris littered the ground, twisted metal, fabric shredded, small bones gnawed clean. Each object told the same story: despair, destruction, silence left behind. She sank to the ground beside a moss-covered rock, pressing her forehead against her knees. Her fingers dug into the soil, mud pressing under her nails, rough and wet. "I can't," she whispered. "It's everywhere, everything I touch." Her voice cracked, swallowed by the forest. "We're just." Mara crouched beside her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. The contact was grounding, solid against the trembling. "We're not done," she said. "Not yet. Look at me." Rowan lifted her eyes, saw the faint glimmer of determination reflected in Mara's pale green. The forest felt heavy, oppressive, but Mara's presence drew a line through it, a fragile anchor in a storm. "Do you remember the clearing with the pedestal?" Mara asked. Rowan nodded. "The object inside the bundle?" Rowan's fingers pressed instinctively to her satchel. The token burned faintly, almost urgent. Mara's eyes met hers. "It's not just a marker. It's a guide, a key, and there's more." Rowan's stomach clenched. "More?" "Yes," Mara said. "There's someone alive, someone waiting for us, and they know the way through this." Rowan's breath hitched. The forest seemed to still, holding its moisture-laden air, listening. Her tongue tasted ash and hope all at once. "Alive?" Mara nodded. "But we have to reach him before." Her voice dropped, unfinished. The forest whispered in agreement, and Rowan felt the weight of every death they had passed, every hollow clearing, pressing against her chest. Hope was small, fragile, but it existed. Chapter 10: The Flicker of Hope. The trail wound sharply upward now, jagged roots gripping at their boots. Rowan's muscles burned with exhaustion, her cloak sticking to her back with sweat and mud. The mist had thinned, leaving only wisps that curled around moss and stone. The smell of wet pine and cold earth clung to them both, layered with faint smoke from a distant, unseen fire. The token throbbed in Rowan's satchel, warm and insistent. Every pulse echoed her own heartbeat, whispering a rhythm she could follow. "They said someone's alive," Rowan murmured, voice rough. "Someone who can help." Mara's eyes softened. "Not maybe. Someone who knows." She brushed a hand over a branch slick with rain, texture rough against her palm. "If we can reach them, we might stand a chance. But we have to move carefully. Every step matters." Rowan rose slowly, muscles trembling. Her fingers traced the satchel strap again, anchoring her to reality. The forest stretched before them, shadows pooling in hollows, mist curling between roots like fingers. Every sound, water dripping, distant animal calls, their own labored breaths, felt amplified, insistent. Then, through the gray, a faint shimmer appeared, a shape moving in the distance. It was small, deliberate enough to suggest life. Rowan's heart jumped, the copper tang of blood and ash mixed with adrenaline, thick on her tongue. "Do you see that?" she whispered. Mara nodded. "Keep calm." Step by step, the figure paused, then lifted a hand, beckoning them. The gesture was small, human, tangible. Rowan's chest ached with the weight of desperation, but the pulse of the token against her hip thrummed with possibility. They moved together, boots sinking into wet earth, hands brushing roots and stones, hearts tethered to hope so fragile it might shatter at any moment. The forest pressed around them. Silent, watchful, but they pressed forward anyway. Somewhere deep inside the mist, they were no longer alone. And for the first time in days, Rowan felt a flicker of certainty, they might survive this night yet. Chapter 11. Still Waters. The forest had changed. The oppressive damp of night had given way to a softer, gentler mist. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in uneven shafts, catching the tips of moss and dew-draped leaves. The air smelled sweet with pine and wildflowers, tinged faintly with smoke, though now it seemed distant, harmless, almost comforting. Rowan walked slowly beside Mara. Their boots pressed into soft dirt, leaving prints that would fade with the morning sun. The rhythm of their movement was deliberate, unhurried, almost meditative. "I can feel it," Rowan said softly, voice nearly lost beneath the gentle hum of the forest. "The forest, it's still alive, but it's quieter." Mara nodded. "It's like it's exhaling. Or maybe it's just letting us breathe." She brushed a hand across a fern, delicate and velvety. "We've survived the worst. That counts for something." Rowan's eyes traced the mist curling over a small stream. The water whispered over smooth stones, carrying the faint metallic tang of iron and the earthy scent of moss. She knelt briefly, letting her fingers touch the water. It was cold, biting, and yet alive, moving endlessly past her grasp. The sensation grounded her, a reminder that not everything in the forest had been twisted or cruel. "I can't stop thinking about the others," she said after a moment, her voice low, almost vulnerable. "All the people we lost. The places we passed." Mara rested a hand on her shoulder. "I know." Her touch was solid, anchoring. "But they aren't gone from us. We carry them, Rowan. Every memory, every echo. That's how we honor them." Rowan exhaled slowly, tasting wet earth and the faint tang of pine. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. The forest didn't feel hostile here. Not yet. The trail widened and led them to a small, shallow clearing. Sunlight spilled across it in a mosaic of gold and green, highlighting dew on grass blades and the faint shimmer of mist. Rowan sat on a moss-covered log, legs pulled close, feeling the damp and cool seep through her clothes. Mara crouched beside her, cup of water in hand, offering it. Rowan accepted, the metallic taste of the tin mingling with the fresh sweetness of the water. "We made it this far," Mara said softly. "And that counts for everything." Rowan nodded, letting herself linger in the moment. The forest hummed faintly, alive with gentle movement, the call of a bird, the rustle of small creatures, the drip of distant water. For the first time in days, Rowan felt her body unclench. Chapter 12. Light between branches. The trail ahead climbed slowly, sunlight breaking fully through the canopy. Mist hung in soft ribbons, drifting across roots and stones. The forest smelled warm now. Dry leaves, pine resin, faint ash, and something floral she couldn't name. It filled her lungs, slow and deep, each breath carrying a measure of relief. Rowan's boots pressed into soft earth, leaving prints alongside Mara's. The token in her satchel was cool now, calm, no longer pulsing like a heartbeat. Its presence was steady, a reminder that the night's terror had passed. "You ever wonder what happens after all this?" Rowan asked quietly. She traced a pattern in the dirt with her toe, the earth cold and rough beneath her boot. Mara smiled faintly, watching a shaft of light dance on a leaf. "After all this, we survive. We rebuild. We carry what's left." Her voice was low, reflective. "We live." Rowan nodded, swallowing. The words felt heavy with truth. She inhaled the forest's perfume, wet soil, pine, the faint tang of something burned and left behind, and let herself feel it, grounding in the present. They paused at the edge of a stream, wide enough to reflect the sky. Rowan knelt, cupping water in her hands, letting it run through her fingers, smooth and cold. The sound, trickling over stone, whispering past roots, was almost musical. Mara joined her, both of them drinking slowly, tasting the forest's quiet resilience. "It feels different here," Rowan said. "Like the forest is letting go." Mara leaned back, eyes closed, breathing the same air. "Or maybe, we're finally learning to let go ourselves." Rowan watched the sunlight strike the water's surface, glittering like tiny stars. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine something beyond survival, a life beyond fear. Chapter 13. A Quiet Resolve. By midday, the trail opened into a small glade. The canopy lifted, letting in warmth and light. Birds sang from the branches, insects hummed softly, and the mist had vanished completely. Rowan and Mara stood side by side, boots pressed into soft earth, listening to the forest breathe. Rowan touched the token again, feeling its solid weight, a silent reminder of everything they'd endured. Her hands were still marked with mud and scratches, but the ache was no longer sharp, only lingering. Mara tilted her head, scanning the glade. "We've walked through fire, Rowan. And we're still here. That's proof. Proof enough to move forward." Rowan exhaled, tasting fresh air and the faint scent of pine. She allowed herself a small smile, fleeting but real. "It doesn't erase what happened," she said, "but maybe it means we can carry it differently." The forest seemed to acknowledge her words. Sunlight streaked across trunks and moss, casting long shadows that softened instead of threatening. Leaves rustled in a gentle breeze, carrying the scent of wet earth and a hint of something new, flowers just beginning to bloom. Rowan turned to Mara. "We survived this. We keep walking." Mara nodded, a faint grin tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Step by step, that's all we can do." Rowan adjusted her pack, feeling the cool weight of the token and the warmth of Mara's presence. For the first time since the trail had begun, she allowed herself to move forward without dread pressing at her chest. The forest still hummed, still remembered, but now it felt like it was guiding them rather than hunting them. They stepped into the glade together, leaving footprints that the sun would soon dry. The trail stretched on beyond, still winding, still shadowed in places, but alive in a gentler, more forgiving way. And Rowan knew that whatever came next, they would face it, not with the terror of the hunted, but with the quiet strength of those who had survived. Chapter 14. The Edge of Dawn. The trail ended, not with a sudden cliff, not with a roar of unseen power, but in a quiet clearing that felt like the forest itself had been holding its breath, waiting for them. Sunlight broke fully through the canopy, spilling across the moss-covered ground in warm gold. The mist had lifted entirely, curling only in faint ribbons that clung to roots and stones like memory itself. The air smelled of pine and earth, dry now, with a hint of smoke lingering from the nights past, but it was faint, almost comforting, not threatening. Rowan's boots pressed into soft soil, mud crusted along the sides. She knelt, letting her fingers trail through it, feeling its rough texture, letting the cool dampness ground her. The token throbbed faintly in her satchel, now steady, calm, no longer pulsing with warning. It felt complete. Mara stood beside her, eyes scanning the edges of the clearing. Her hands rested lightly on her pack straps, posture relaxed, yet alert. "We made it," she said quietly, letting the words settle between them like sunlight on leaves. Rowan exhaled slowly, tasting fresh air mixed with pine, faint ash, and something floral she couldn't name. "We survived," she murmured, letting the weight of it sink in. She pressed her palms to her knees, feeling muscles ache and tremble, alive with exhaustion and relief. The clearing was alive in a gentle way. Birds called from branches overhead, insects hummed in the warm air, and the faint trickle of water from a hidden spring added a soft music to the stillness. Rowan watched sunlight glint on a patch of dew, tiny prisms sparkling like fragments of hope scattered across the earth. She finally let herself look at Mara fully. "We kept each other alive," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady, even when it felt impossible. Mara's lips curved in a small smile, faint and genuine. "That's the thing about surviving, Rowan. It's never about being alone. It's about holding on, even when everything else is trying to break you." Rowan rose to her feet, brushing mud from her clothes. She unzipped her satchel, holding the token in her hands. It was smooth, solid, etched with symbols that no longer shifted. She felt its weight and warmth, the tangible reminder of every step, every loss, every near-fatal choice along the trail. It guided us," Rowan whispered. "Kept us moving, kept us alive. And now," she looked up at the forest around them, sunlight streaming through branches, shadows soft and forgiving. "Now it's over. Or maybe it's just a beginning." Mara stepped closer, hands brushing Rowan's. The contact was grounding, simple, human. "Beginnings are always messy," she said. "But this one is ours." The forest seemed to respond. A breeze rustled leaves overhead, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and pine, gentle and steady. The distant hum beneath the soil, the pulse that had followed them through nights of terror, had faded, leaving only the soft, living rhythm of the forest itself. Rowan let herself smile, small and fragile at first, then fuller as the warmth spread through her chest. The ash and smoke of their journey lingered faintly in her senses, but it no longer burned. It was a memory, not a threat. She stepped forward first, Mara following, leaving footprints in the moss and soil that would fade in time. Each step was slow, deliberate, weighted with relief and hope, and yet they felt lighter than any step they had taken before. As they walked, Rowan allowed herself one final glance back at the trail, the winding, moonlit path that had tested everything she was and everything she could become. It lay silent now, still and watchful, but no longer hunting. The token pulsed faintly one last time, warm in her hand. She tucked it safely back into her satchel, feeling its reassurance. Rowan exhaled, tasting pine and earth, sunlight and air. She and Mara walked together, step by careful step, toward whatever lay beyond the forest, beyond the trail. The journey had left them scarred, weary, and trembling, but alive. And for the first time in a long while, the forest felt like a home they could move through, not a place that moved against them. The edge of dawn stretched before them, golden and infinite. And Rowan believed they could face it. Epilogue. The forest breathes. The forest breathed around them. Dew clung to every leaf, shimmering in the gentle sunlight like fragments of scattered stars. Rowan and Mara had long left the trail behind, but its memory lingered in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible hum beneath the soft rustle of branches. The earth smelled of pine, moss, and wet soil, layered with the faint sweetness of wildflowers, growing quietly wherever the trail had passed. Rowan knelt by a small stream, dipping her hands into the cold water. It ran clear, tumbling over smooth stones, carrying the scent of life and earth. She let it trickle over her fingers, letting the forest's calm seep into her bones. The token in her satchel rested quietly, no longer urgent, no longer demanding. It was just a piece of the world now, a reminder of what they had endured and survived. Mara sat beside her on a mossy bank, watching sunlight dance across the rippling water. Her hair caught the light in soft copper threads, her breathing slow, steady, and unhurried. Around them, the forest seemed to sigh, exhaling its centuries of memory and allowing a moment of stillness. A bird called somewhere high in the canopy, a bright, clear note that seemed almost celebratory. Somewhere deeper in the forest, water dripped from a hidden spring, joining a chorus of life that had persisted through shadow and fire. Rowan could feel it, the pulse of the forest, steady and patient, indifferent and alive. She stood finally, brushing moss from her trousers, inhaling deeply. The trail behind them was gone to the eye, but the memory of it would never leave. Every step, every narrow escape, every whisper of shadow. It had shaped her, carved her in ways both painful and precious. Mara rose beside her, shoulder brushing hers, a quiet companionship that needed no words. "It's still here," she said, voice soft, carrying only the weight of truth. "The forest, the trail, the life in it, waiting." Rowan nodded, tasting the sweetness of damp leaves and sunlight on her tongue. "Waiting," she repeated. "And so are we." They stepped into the sun-drenched clearing together. The breeze lifted, rustling leaves and carrying with it a faint scent of renewal, wet earth, pine, and the promise of morning. The token throbbed faintly in Rowan's satchel, warm and steady, as if acknowledging their survival. For the first time in weeks, the forest felt welcoming rather than threatening. Alive rather than haunting. And Rowan, feeling the weight of what they had endured and the fragile hope that remained, let herself believe they had survived the Moonlit Trail, and the world beyond it was theirs to face. The forest whispered softly behind them, carrying their footsteps and memories, alive and eternal, as they walked into the light of a new day. The trail still exists, not on any map, not marked by stone or sign. But if you walk deep enough into the forest, where moonlight bends strangely, where the ground hums beneath your feet, you may feel it waiting. Some paths never disappear, they simply wait for the next soul brave enough, or foolish enough, to listen. The forest remembers.